Welcome to Embrace Your Inner Boldness, the podcast dedicated to empowering you to live confidently, embracing all parts of who you truly are. I'm Melissa Henning-Frank, and I'm the founder, success coach, and consultant of Becoming Bold, LLC, and you can count on me to be your guide on this incredible journey of self-discovery and transformation. Let's get right to it. Hello, and thanks for listening in to Embrace Your Inner Boldness. Today, we're peeling back the onion layers, as they say, of something we all carry, whether we admit it or not, unconscious bias. And before you click exit on this episode, I'm definitely aware that this phrase can really get under people's skin in a very uncomfortable, very defensive way. So I Googled different ways to talk about it. And here's a few other phrases you could swap out for the phrase unconscious bias if you prefer. You could also call it a cognitive shortcut, mental programming, hidden beliefs, automatic judgments, internal filters, subtle preferences, conditioned thinking, learned perceptions, neural defaults, perceptual errors, thought habits, default wiring, pattern recognition, invisible influence, bias blind spot, silent programming, snap sorting, cultural coding, unseen filters, power patterns, autopilot thinking, inherited judgments, false certainty, assumed truths, social conditioning, rooted assumptions, lens distortion, perception trap. There's more on this list, and I really hesitated taking any of them out just because all of them accurately capture what this thing is that we call unconscious bias. But let's get one thing clear. This episode is not about blame. It's about truth, awareness, and transformation. It doesn't matter what you call it, so pick one that helps you name it so you can tame it. What matters is that by the end of this episode, you'll understand what it is, why it is, and how it can really block us from reality and the fact that we all do it. Unconscious bias is the quiet voice behind 1,000 daily decisions. It's why we might trust one person over another. It's why we might promote one idea and dismiss the next. Or it might be why we feel fear in one moment and safety in another, all without any logic to back it up. Our brain thinks it's being helpful. It's trying to keep us safe, efficient, and certain. And feelings are real, but not always true. Let's talk about why and why it's time to question those autopilot thoughts. First, we're going to talk about what unconscious bias is really. And we'll talk about the definition, how these biases are formed, and why it happens. Unconscious biases are social stereotypes we form outside of our conscious awareness. Double down on that. We are not conscious of these things when they're forming in our brain. They're mental shortcuts. They're created by our environment, our upbringing, our experiences, the media, and culture. Let's talk about how they're formed. Think about the repeated messages that you're exposed to through media, education, and the environment. These exposures become consistent patterns, and it reinforces those patterns and makes the message feel more normal. And then the brain puts things into categories. It makes it much more efficient when we can put certain people into boxes. Then comes the automation. It's those mental shortcuts that are running on autopilot. And then what happens is we start to act on these biases in our behaviors, often without realizing it. But why does this happen? Think about it this way. There's so much science behind the way our brain works, and especially with unconscious bias. The brain processes 11 million bits of information per second. 11 million bits of information per second. And only 40 of those bits reach conscious awareness. So out of 11 million bits of information, only 40 reach our conscious awareness. So bias helps us sort through all of that chaos, but it comes at a cost. It benefits us by helping us make quick decisions because we don't have to sit there and sort through those 11 million bits, but it harms us because it reinforces unexamined assumptions. Let's get into that. You have bias even if you think you don't. If you have a brain, you have bias, period. And this includes progressive people, spiritual people, empathetic people, people of every background and every identity. Bias isn't always about hate. It's often about habit. So let's talk about some everyday biases that we don't realize are bias. It could be assuming someone with an accent is less intelligent, believing that thin equals healthy, thinking a man must be the leader, assuming someone isn't disabled because you can't see it, assuming someone is straight unless you're told otherwise, assuming that if someone supports DEI, they must be liberal, seeing a red hat and assuming they must be conservative, trusting people with certain job titles or degrees more automatically, expecting older people to struggle with technology, labeling women emotional but men passionate, thinking someone doesn't look like a veteran. And I want to share my story to give you some background on that last one. When I ask about a veteran's discount in any store, it really doesn't matter what store it is. Typically, they will offer a 10% discount. And if you didn't know that and you're a veteran, now you know. So take advantage of that. You earned it. But anyway, when I ask about the veteran's discount and I'm with my husband, the cashier always thanks my husband for his service. But I'm the veteran. So this is one small example of unconscious bias. And it's not that the cashier is being unkind in any way. It's just that they're operating from programming and conditioning, and their automatic thought process is so fast that they see my husband and assume that he is the veteran. Also, have you seen how some stores are reserving parking spots for veterans? I haven't parked in one yet because I feel like people will look at me and think I stole that spot from someone who deserves it. And I kind of laugh about that because I really should take my own advice and stop playing small in that way. I want to share some more examples of everyday bias. So the things that you encounter every single day and you might not even realize that you're forming these automatic thoughts. And my hope with sharing these is that you'll stop and think, oh, wait, I've definitely done that and I didn't mean to. So how about assuming someone's gender or background based on their name? People's names carry a lot of information and we make a lot of assumptions about that. What about skipping over a name that you find hard to pronounce? Or assuming someone is unprofessional because they're dressed casually? How about thinking that someone is wealthy or high maintenance because they wear designer items? Or respecting someone's input more because they have manager in their title, even if someone else has more experience? It could be assuming that the person setting up the Zoom call is the assistant, or telling a younger colleague that they're too ambitious or not ready yet. It could be assuming an older person isn't comfortable with technology, interpreting someone who doesn't smile as unfriendly, thinking someone who's quiet must not be confident, assuming someone from a certain city, state, or country behaves in a certain way. So, for example, people from New York are rude, or Midwesterners are so nice. Anything else that kind of lumps people all in one category could be bias. Assuming that a woman with kids won't want a promotion. Assuming someone without kids has more time. Assuming someone who doesn't drink is uptight. Or thinking that someone who loves astrology is flaky. So why does this matter? Why is it so important? Let's talk about the impact on the micro and the macro. In your personal world, bias can damage trust in your relationships. You might miss out on connection or collaboration. You might hold yourself back based on internalized bias. And in your broader world, think about it this way. Bias shows up in healthcare, hiring, education, and media. So you've got humans out there in the broader world. They all have brains, and our brains have bias. And so that's what's happening. Bias doesn't start big. It starts small, one assumption at a time. It's a slow fade until inequity becomes normalized. Let's talk about how social media and leadership reinforce bias. You probably have already sort of thought about this, but social media algorithms feed what you already believe, and that equals confirmation bias. You only see perspectives that match your current worldview. The more you like something, the more you comment on something, the more posts that you share, that's the more that you'll get back to you. You become less likely to question your automatic assumptions because everything that's coming back to you is mirroring back your current assumptions as it is. And in leadership, leaders model either inclusion or exclusion. And who leaders trust, who they mentor, who they promote, shapes the company's culture. If leaders are unaware of bias, they're unconsciously rewarding sameness. And they might lump certain groups of people into one certain category or word or phrase. And then that becomes embedded into the culture. Bias really spreads fast when people in power aren't examining their influence. So what can we do about this? We actually have more control than you think. First, you're going to start by interrupting the thought. You can't always control your first thought. It's going to come in, but you can choose what your second thought is going to be. So that's how you start to interrupt unconscious bias. So what you'll want to do is make sure that you notice the reaction. Notice your thoughts. If you have a snap judgment, and you know you will, that's your signal. So what you need to do when you notice it is name it. You name it to tame it. You think to yourself, this is a conditioned thought, not a fact. And then choose the second thought. Ask yourself, what else might be true? Get really curious about it. Where did this come from? Who told me that? And then act with awareness, not on autopilot. So for example, instead of assuming who's in charge, say, who is going to take the lead here? And that helps you deactivate your bias. You interrupt that thought. So how do you rewire this bias for the long term? You know that bias isn't going to disappear just with your good intentions, but it does unravel with consistent attention. So try these next 5 things that I'm going to talk about. The first one, read and listen to diverse voices. Why does this matter? It's because we absorb the world through stories. If the only stories we're consuming are told from one perspective, our lens becomes incredibly narrow and super distorted. So some examples are for books. Read memoirs or fiction written by the authors of different races, generations, abilities, gender identities, or cultural backgrounds. Podcasts. Follow voices that challenge your usual thought patterns. This episode might be one of those if you've made it this far. News sources. Break out of your echo chamber. So think about rotating in one international or alternative news outlet to your weekly routine, or find unbiased news sources. And instead of just saying, I support diversity, ask yourself, can I name 5 thought leaders I follow who have lived experiences different than mine? Number 2, take an audit and an inventory of your social feed. Why does this matter? It's because algorithms are designed to show you more of what you already believe, and that can unconsciously reinforce your biases, even when you mean well. So, for example, unfollow accounts that promote fear, outrage, or only one narrative. Intentionally follow people with lived experiences that differ from yours, and this could be across age, ability, race, gender, religion, etc. So for example, if your entire feed is people from your high school or it's Generation X leadership gurus, add a few Gen Z creators or some disabled thought leaders or indigenous educators. And don't just follow, engage with them. Listen to what's being said. Don't argue, absorb. So do a 10-minute scan of your feed and ask yourself whose voices are missing. Number 3, get comfortable saying, I don't know enough about this. Why does this matter? It's because we've been conditioned to equate not knowing with weakness, and that's some bullshit. Humility is where learning begins, and one where bias gets dismantled. So how can you do that? Well, in a meeting, you could say, That's not my lived experience. I'd love to hear from someone who knows more about this. In conversation, you could say, I realize I've never had to think about this before. Can you help me understand or recommend where I can learn more? In self-reflection, ask yourself, before I react, do I have all the context? And you probably don't. And then replace defensiveness with curiosity. So when you start getting that trigger that makes you want to snap back, clap back, type back, respond to that with curiosity. This will help create psychological safety for your growth and for the growth of people around you. Number 4, catch your own patterns of comfort and exclusion. This matters because bias often hides in who you default to, who you listen to, and who you unintentionally avoid or overlook. Some examples of this: who do you gravitate toward in group settings, and why? Who do you assume is the expert in the room? Who do you feel awkward or avoidant around, and what assumptions might be underneath? So a daily practice that you could do before meetings or decisions, ask yourself, whose voice hasn't been considered? Am I replicating sameness in my circles and my team and my conversations? Number 5, invite others to call you in, not out. We all miss things. So empowering others to name bias with care builds a culture of growth, not shame. So for example, in a team setting, you can say, if I ever say or do something that causes harm or reflects bias, I hope you'll let me know. I want to do better. With a friend or a peer, you could say, hey, I'm working on noticing my blind spots. If you see something I don't, I'd value your perspective. You could even add to your email signature that feedback is welcome, especially when it helps me grow. Make it clear that you're open to being human and you're also open to evolving. Awareness is just the beginning. Let's get into generational bias and the workplace. Unconscious bias isn't limited to race, gender, or ability. It shows up in how we view and treat different age groups too. This is known as generational bias, and it quietly shapes hiring, leadership, and collaboration. Let's look at some statistics. 70% of workers say they've experienced age-related bias. 2 in 3 people over age 45 said they've seen or experienced age discrimination. 36% of Gen Z workers say they're not taken seriously due to their age. Older applicants receive 46% fewer callbacks than younger ones. 75% of hiring managers admit to assuming older workers won't adapt. 75%. And stereotypes run both ways. Gen Z equals entitled, boomers are stuck in their ways. Why does this hurt the workplace? Because younger voices can get dismissed even when they bring innovation. Older workers might get overlooked for promotions or skill building opportunities. Teams lose valuable insight by ignoring generational diversity. Bias creates distrust, resentment, and it weakens collaboration. And then innovation suffers when we only let one generation lead. So if you've ever thought, they're too young to lead that, or they're too old to keep up, that is a bias checkpoint. The workplace thrives on synergy, not sameness. I highly encourage you to take some time to reflect, and I've got some journal prompts to help you explore your thinking. Ask yourself, who do I trust without question and why? Who do I judge or ignore and why? Where did I learn that belief? What bias have I internalized about myself? What does choosing my second thought look like? If we're really being honest with ourselves, living on autopilot is easy and, well, kind of lazy. And it's also dangerous to your growth. It's dangerous to your relationships. And it's dangerous to the systems that you're a part of. Every time we let our unconscious bias go unchecked, we reinforce a world that leaves people unseen, unheard, and undervalued. We can't pretend that this is neutral. Bias shapes how you see the world, and in turn, it shapes how you treat it. So if you're walking through life letting assumptions run the show, you're wasting your power and you're slowly contributing to the very problems that you say you care about. Now is not the time to stay comfortable. It's the time to stay conscious. Boldness isn't just about speaking up, it's about waking up. We've all been programmed, but we're not robots. You get to pause. You get to question the thought. You get to choose a better one. Bias isn't just a them problem. It's an all of us opportunity. And every time you challenge an automatic assumption, you're doing the work. Quietly, boldly, one thought at a time. So keep questioning your answers. Stay curious about why you think and believe the way you do. And until next time, please be kind to your mind. That's it for today's episode of Embrace Your Inner Boldness. If this stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Screenshot this episode, tag me at Becoming Bold LLC, and share it with someone else who's ready to rise. And hey, if you haven't already, take a second to subscribe, rate, and review the show. That's how we spread the boldness and keep this movement growing. Whatever came up for you today, feel the fear and do it anyway. You don't need to wait for perfect timing or permission. You are powerful. You are ready. And remember, the only limit to your boldness is the one you set for yourself. Until next time, stay bold, stay curious, and keep becoming you.